around outlining and making a case to the American people why this is not just a voter issue but a national security issue that might get it through the final hurdle.
Now, according to a survey last year, about a fifth of Americans think fraud is a significant concern in our elections. Now, most are unsure or think it is not a problem. Jared, what do you make of those numbers?
But look, I think that one of the things that we're seeing is elections are decided by a very narrow margin in a very few handful of states. And that makes it all the more pressing that even having that small concern, not a majority concern, but a small concern that there is fraud might influence the outcome of a national election, of a state election, of something very important. And I think a lot of this comes back to people's own experiences, what they see when they go to polling places. And people who see disorganized polling, people who see questionable ballots, they have the perception that there is a rampant fraud. Other people may not have the same perception. But ultimately, that's why we're waiting for Donald Trump and his receipts to see exactly what the evidence is.
And Chris, you've been on the ground in several battleground states ahead of, elections. What's your sense of that feeling on the ground?
Well, the feeling on the ground that I heard from many people when I toured for the 2024 election was a lack of confidence, especially on the Republican side. And, the Democrats often, they lament that lack of confidence, and they almost blame Republicans for not having confidence in the elections. They say, oh, this is a problem that you have, that you don't trust the legitimacy of our elections. When in reality, if they wanted to increase the confidence in elections, they'd probably support policies like we see in the Save America Act, which would, for certain, they would get rid of the fears that the Republicans have, that there is fraud going on, that there are non-citizens voting. There's an easy way to fix that. The Republicans are putting that on the table. It's really the ball's in the Democrats' court to say, okay, we don't want to talk about this anymore. We're gonna fix it.
Now, of course, a lot of attention on this speech tonight. ABC and NBC have said they won't carry the president's speech on broadcast, but will have it live online. Gerard, what do you make of that decision?
It's not at all surprising that some networks don't want to cover what the president says in real time. They want to be able to parse it and provide their commentary with feedback when it's finally aired. But I think it's disappointing that when we do have something that's such a national significant moment, and we are coming up to major elections, we are coming up to a very decisive and determinative midterm election, I think it's incumbent on all of us to be aware of what the issues are, how Americans vote, and what concerns and security concerns we have with voting.
And there's been a lot of reporting on what Trump may or may not say in the speech tonight or declassify. Chris, your thoughts?
Nothing about aliens, I don't think, even though some people are thinking it's Disclosure Day. That's one thing I've been hearing around town. But I think I could definitely, we heard from Mari, China is going to be mentioned, Save America Act, the integrity of our elections, they're all coming on the table.
China has everybody
one other point that I
voting
didn't make previously, but I want to put that out there. Democrats also, they stress that when they win, there's high voter turnout. Well, there's nothing that's going to encourage more people to come out for the elections than if they know if they're secure. And I think having, the very secure elections and giving people the confidence that only citizens are voting would increase voter turnout.
In terms of receipts and what could be declassified tonight, Gerard, what are you expecting or hoping to see?
I'm hoping to see statistics. I'm hoping to see what the DNI investigations have found. I'm hoping to see details about what the Chinese government is alleged to have done, and to the extent that we have knowledge about that, for that to be shared publicly. We know that, for example, in the UK, they hacked into the Electoral Commission. We want to see if they did something similar in the US when we're talking about accessing ballots, whether they did so by purchasing them on the open market or by hacking our systems. And if they did hack our systems, that is a very legitimate concern that the president is raising in a very timely way.
All right, well, we have a lot more to get to, but we're going to go to a quick break because
They got
coming up
caught
yesterday,
smuggling
the House
IDs
Democrats voted to
in
reject
before
aid to Israel.
2020.
Today, the minority leader explains that vote. And abolish the Senate, replace the president and Supreme Court, ditch the Electoral College. The Democratic Socialists of America unveil a new platform, and our panel will react later. Military assistance from a broader national security bill. The amendment failing 104 to 314, with most Republicans joining some Democrats to keep the aid in place. But that tally laying bare a sharp split inside the party as the war in Gaza enters its third year and thousands of Palestinians have been killed.
The situation relative to the United States relationship with Israel, the Palestinian people, and policy in the Middle East has to change because the current status quo is unsustainable. I think the way in which we'll try to approach this issue is similar to the way in which we try to approach every issue. Thoughtful, inclusive, involve dialogue across
Inclusive?
the entire spectrum of the House Democratic Caucus, and then be able to land on the highest common denominator, but being guided by the effort to actually create a just and lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinian people.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries himself opposing the bid to cut off aid, as other Democrats and Republicans warned the amendment was too blunt and would undercut a key U.S. ally. And even though the measure was defeated, the size of the Democratic defection, suggesting this fight over how far to condition support for Israel likely to return in future
It's all
aid
those,
votes. Back with me in studio, our most excellent panel, Gerard Filitti, political strategist and attorney, and Chris Bob, NTD's political correspondent. Now, this Democratic split over Israel aid also comes as several staunchly anti-Israel Democratic Socialist candidates have ousted longtime progressive incumbents across the country. Gerard, I know you've worked on many anti-Semitism cases. What do you make of this trend we're seeing?
It's a very worrying trend when we're seeing the far left become so anti-democratic and anti-Israel that they're endangering American national security. Ultimately, when Hakeem Jeffries is talking about a just and lasting peace, you don't have just and lasting peace or security if you're handicapping the only democracy in the area that is fighting for democratic values and that represents America's interests. So ultimately, this is counterproductive. It enhances the risk of terrorism there and here. It enhances the growth of Islamist extremism there and here. So this is really handicapping America's allies and America's ability to defend itself preemptively and increasing the costs and burdens for us here in the homeland.
And the Jewish population has traditionally or historically voted Democratic. Chris, what do you make of that, and if we are going to see changes as we head to elections?
Well, the Jewish population in America, American Jews, have a lower favorability rate for the state of Israel than white evangelical Christians now in this country, if you look at Pew. Which is interesting, and it speaks to a new political reality. And I think that's definitely the case for the Democratic Party. And if you listen to Hakeem Jeffries there, I was just taking a few notes, dialogue about the spectrum, guided effort, you can tell he's afraid, he's scared. He's using all of these terms to try to hide the fact that a lot of people in his party are totally distancing themselves from support of Israel. He might not agree with that, but he knows that if he wants to remain where he is, he has to go lighter than to just call it out. And unfortunately, that's what you've seen about a number of issues in the Democratic Party. He's unwilling to call out the Democratic Socialists. He's unwilling to call out the anti-Semites. And I think if you look at it also from a demographic perspective, you see that, I'm looking at the Pew poll again, 84% of people who are Democrat or lean Democrat have a somewhat or very unfavorable view of Israel. And then you look at the same thing for Republicans. That's in the 18 to 49 age group, 57%, and it averages around 70. So you're seeing younger Americans go towards this model. And I think the Democratic Party, if they care about democracy in the Middle East, they would try to do something about that instead of talking about all these things, solutions, dialogues. Just say what you believe. That's all it is.
All right, well, speaking of changes, the Democratic Socialists of America unveiled their new platform, which begins with a pitch to imagine a future without capitalism. It includes replacing the Senate and President with bodies that answer to Congress, abolishing the border and law enforcement bodies, universal public housing, government takeovers of corporations, and a lot more in this vein. Chris, I know you've interviewed Democratic Socialists, so how is this?
Some of them. I've interviewed some of them, I can say, because some of them have seen that I come from NTD and they don't want to talk. But I have their little manifesto here. I printed it out. Not too long. You should give it a look. It's great comedy. We're talking about things which are amazing. It starts with a research question. Imagine taking a day off from work in the future without capitalism. Question, what would you do on your day off? Well, they say you can go to the doctor. You can, go on transportation. You can go to the park. All things you can do under capitalism, but you can do them also under socialism. And it's interesting because Bernie Sanders, when he campaigned as a democratic socialist, he would always stress the democratic part of it first. He wouldn't say just a socialist. He would say a democratic socialist. In all of these, they're talking about what it means to have a socialist day off, what it means to be a socialist. And they go on. They say there's going to be no prisons, which is great for the criminals. We're going to disempower police unions. This is coming from a group that says they're pro-union. We're going to abolish the police. Wonderful. And we're going to get full feminism, which involves the queer community. Now, queer liberation is my #1 political issue, but I don't think it is so for the majority of Americans. And a lot of these things that they're putting on here, they're pretty radical. They basically create this class which they call the bosses. And the bosses have done everything from, wait for this, started war in Beirut, Gaza, and Tehran, and also made the weather warm. So these are very powerful people. And the solution to do that is to get rid of the greatest document of freedom ever written, which is the United States Constitution, and create their own with socialist characteristics, as they have in China and other places like where my family came from in the Ukraine. And unfortunately, the record states that when you do something like that, it leads to mass murder and horror and starvation. But they want us to imagine a future. So in the theme of John Lennon, I can imagine a future where we can all live as one, united in a breadline. And it's just very depressing stuff. If you read into it, you look at it, you see that it's so distant from the founding of this country, so distant from the free market,
to the
so distant, all the
USSR.
principles, John Locke, that created this country and what made it great and wealthy and successful and #1 on the world stage, that it almost seems like it's intentionally created to destroy us. That's all what I want you to talk too, but
They need to drop the pretense of democratic socialists of America. There's nothing American in this.
Yeah.
This is a transformation to a Leninist system that we saw in 1917 that failed spectacularly. And we're already seeing the elements here. We're seeing the same idea. Do away with the Senate, do away with the Supreme Court, have a subservient president. There's a special committee of people who know what is good for us and who will make the rules for us without real voter input. But at the end of the day, what's happening within the Democratic Party now is what happened in the early Soviet times. They're turning on each other. Bernie Sanders, he's too Jewish to be a good socialist, so he's out. AOC, she's too supportive of Israel, of all people, so she's out. So they're starting to narrow down and see who is a true believer in socialism, who believes in this agenda, which is really Marxism 101. You take away the means of production, destroy the economy, and everyone is subservient to you because you're the only one who has access to anything. And it's really scary that people are buying into this, but it's really scary that this is the hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. Hakeem Jeffries is not doing anything to fight it. We don't see any of the senior elder statesmen doing anything to fight this takeover, so this is becoming the norm. These are people who now have access to the funding and the machine of the Democratic Party, so this is the inevitable trend of the Democratic Party. Not of America, this is of China, of Russia, of anything else. This is socialism. It's not American.
Zooming out a bit here, officials from more than 60 countries participated in a U.S.-led summit on countering far-left political terrorism today, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio calling for a restructuring of global counterterrorism efforts to be able to handle the rise of these attacks. He said 93% of terror attacks in the West have come from the extreme left, rising to a level not seen in decades here in the United States. It's jumping more than 40% in Germany in just the past year and comprising more than 80% of attacks in Greece today. Now, he said the West needs to be clear on the nature of the threat, so let's play some of how he described it.
This is a distinctive and unique evil. It has always been driven by a hatred, above all else, a hatred for civilization itself. It is a revolt of the worst against the best, a revolt of the weak and the cowardly against the strong and the good. It is perpetrated by those who cannot build, who cannot create, who cannot achieve great things, and take their revenge upon the world for their own inadequacy by seeking to destroy those who can. This is what radical leftism is.
Jared, I want to start with you. What was your reaction to the speech?
My reaction is that he is 100% right in identifying the threat and how critical it is right now. What we're seeing today, the level of political violence coming from the left, is really reminiscent of what we've seen in the past, in the 1960s, the 70s, the Weather Underground. Radicals who committed atrocious acts of terror within the United States to tear down our system, to tear down our democracy. And for too many years, under too many Democratic administrations, we've ignored that. We've justified it. We've called it protest when there's nothing peaceful about it. And we fail to address the fact that this is funded, this is organized. It has a very pernicious purpose behind it, which is to fundamentally shake the values of America through terror. So absolutely, we should be addressing it. It's about time that we have a president in the White House who is doing that and bringing to the table organizations and countries in Europe who have been dealing with this issue as well.
Chris?
Yeah, I've been to the ICE protests in Chicago, and I can tell you that there's a good deal of left-wing terrorism going around. I mean, there's Antifa operating in the streets of the United States, and these are radical people that want the destruction of not only the communities that they're protesting in, allegedly, but of the entire nation. We all remember the Summer of Love, where we saw things burn, and we were told that it was peaceful. Well, it's not so. We've seen
That was like
assassinations. Just this past few years,
Minneapolis?
people, they've come after President Trump several times trying to kill him. They've killed Charlie Kirk. This is political extremism. This is mental illness, but it's also politically motivated. And unfortunately, for the perpetrators, the far leftists, there's kind of a union there between kind of insanity and violence.
We'll have a lot more to get to coming up, though. Canadian wildfires choking American cities from Chicago to New York. Floods ravage central Texas.